was how to restore the health of the endothelium without side effect-ridden pharmaceutical drugs. So without any clear path forward, I turned to Mother Nature and began looking into natural ingredients that might shock the endothelium back to life. What I quickly realized was that the ingredients I found in supplements, health food stores, or Amazon did absolutely nothing to address the overall health of the endothelium. So once again, I hit a wall. And hell, I'll admit it, 20 years ago I might have pushed through, unwilling to take no for an answer. But frankly, I was tired. Long days treating patient after patient, and longer nights worrying that my marriage was on its last breath. I began to accept the fact that I was just getting older and would probably never enjoy an active sex life again. Night after night, I found myself with a whiskey in one hand and a remote control in the other, watching nature specials and history documentaries. Until one night, one of those documentaries changed everything. It was about an ancient indigenous tribe called the Tupi Indians. Apparently some of the most brutal, ruthless natives in history. In fact, many of them were ferocious cannibals, eating the bodies of any rival tribe that threatened their dominion, which was long and vast. Until the year 1501, when the Portuguese landed on their shore and used their superior firepower and technology to wipe out an entire generation of young Tupi warriors, leaving only the women and elderly men of the tribe alive. As a result, in order to prevent the tribe's extinction, the surviving elders had to take 3, 4, or even 5 wives apiece. But here's where things got downright fascinating. Not only did these old Tupi men, many of whom were in their 70s or even 80s, take 4 or 5 wives apiece, but according to legend, those wives were deeply satisfied. On top of that, a relatively small group of old men were able to impregnate an entire generation of young Tupi women, which is exactly why the Tupi tribe is alive and well today. I couldn't believe what I was watching. Every other native tribe who suffered a similar invasion, like the Incas and Aztecs, had been completely wiped out, as in, they don't exist today. So how did the Tupis flourish? More importantly, how were men who were 20 or even 30 years older than me able to satisfy 5 wives apiece? I had to know more. So I dug deeper and got my hands on every book, study, and report about the Tupis I could find, and over several weeks consumed every last ounce of information about these incredible people, like how the elder men didn't have a single recorded instance of suffering from enlarged prostates. In fact, the Tupi elders were famous for sleeping deeply through the night, unless of course they were woken up by one of their pretty young wives. I also learned about their bizarre mating rituals. One of these rituals was an odd breathing technique called breath of scorching fire that, according to historical records, the Tupi elders used to energize their genitalia before mating. And I had to ask the question, if these Tupi techniques helped 80-year-olds satisfy multiple women, could they work for me? So one night, I sat cross-legged in my garage and performed the breath of scorching fire right before bed, and woke up 2 hours later next to my tools. Needless to say, they were the only tools in my garage that worked. As my desperation increased, I tried switching to a special Tupi diet, inspired by their cannibalistic ways. No, I didn't eat human flesh, but I did eat practically raw red meat for a week. And guess what happened? It didn't work either. In fact, my wife was absolutely repelled by my bloody breath. Then, after even deeper research into the Tupi, I finally found the answer I was searching for. Before sex, the Tupi men would light a fire and chant a special prayer to the heavens as they stomped and danced and pounded the ground like banshees. So one night, I did just that. I have to admit, never in a million years did I think I'd ever try something so crazy, let alone dangerous. I'd like to reiterate that I am a man of science, a doctor. But hell, desperate times call for desperate measures. So as I stomped around my makeshift backyard fire and called out, "Beam yasa tumba tupi, beam yasa tumba tupi," I glanced up and saw my wife peering down at me through the window. Needless to say, she did not look turned on. And suddenly, I realized just how pathetic I had become. I immediately grabbed all of the books I had about the Tupis, dragged them to the fire, and proceeded to chuck them into the flames. I was done with the stupid Tupi tribe and their stupid Tupi tricks. Done with trying to fix my broken sex life, and done with trying to fix my broken marriage. The next morning, I woke up to an empty bed and a handwritten note from my wife. "Thanks for almost burning down the fucking house. I walked out to the ashes from the night before and began to clean up the massive mess, and noticed something at the edge of the fire pit. A few surviving pages from one of the Tupi books that were relatively unburnt. I picked them up and thumbed through them. As I looked more closely, I saw an image of a Tupi elder drinking from a wooden cup. On the next page was what appeared to be a recipe for what he was drinking, and the recipe had a name, Tupi Tea, which loosely translated to thunderbed. Evidently, this was an ancient tea the Tupi shamans gave to the elders after all the young men were killed by the Portuguese. One of the first ingredients in the mixture was an exotic plant called Tornera diffusa, and I was instantly curious if this ingredient had any clinical proof behind it. So I turned to my library of medical studies, and as it turns out, Tornera diffusa has been used for thousands of years all across the Amazon rainforest as a bladder tonic and aphrodisiac. And in a major study published in the Journal of Ethnopharmacology, scientists uncovered that Tornera diffusa significantly reduced the post-ejaculatory interval. In plain English, it meant that this exotic herb decreased the downtime after ejaculation and helped men achieve another strong erection in less time. Now I was intrigued. So I began to research the next ingredient, Miranta, which translates to potency wood, a rare and exotic shrub from the Amazon rainforest. As I researched Miranta further, it became clear why the Tupi tribe gave it that nickname. For example, in a major study conducted by leading sexual health expert Dr. Jacques Weinberg, Miranta was given to 262 men who suffered from low libido and impotence, and within just 2 short weeks, 62% of the men reported that the ingredient had a dynamic effect on their sexual performance, function, and libido, and more than half of the men reported having frequent erections. The next ingredient was Tribulus terrestris, and while you might have heard of this rare plant for its ability to naturally increase testosterone levels, it turns out that this plant also produces an odd-looking fruit that, when examined in a double-blind, randomized, placebo-controlled study, the absolute gold standard in clinical studies, showed that men who took Tribulus for 60 days saw a 78.1% improvement in the quality of their sexual health. Then I found yet another study that demonstrated Tribulus's pro-erectile effect caused by an increase in the release of nitric oxide from the endothelium. The endothelium? The endothelium, of course! The hidden sex organ responsible for pumping out cGMP, the very enzyme that's so crucial for achieving strong erections. Was this the answer I had been looking for? As I tore through the other ingredients in this Tupi tea, like epimedium and many more, it didn't take me long to realize that each and every one of these ancient Tupi ingredients all had strong clinical evidence that proved they boosted the health of the endothelium. In other words, every ingredient in this tea either promoted cGMP or blocked its evil twin PDE5 naturally without the use of man-made synthetic chemicals. I was in shock. Had the Tupi tribe stumbled upon an endothelium-enhancing, dick-pumping tea over 500 years ago? Or were these cannibalistic pagans several hundred years ahead of their time, ahead of most doctors, prescription meds, and other so-called modern remedies? Well, if there was one thing I knew, I was going to find out. So I began to search for the ingredients in the ancient Tupi recipe. Now, I could tell you all about the trials and tribulations I encountered hunting for these ingredients. I could tell you how most ingredients you find online are complete crap because they're either low quality, they haven't been stored properly to maintain efficacy, or they lack the clinical dosages needed to make a difference. Or I could tell you how getting premium ingredients that actually work, was expensive. I discovered that when it comes to sourcing quality ingredients, you do get what you pay for. Bottom line, getting my hands on these ingredients was a pain in the ass. But after several weeks of trial and error, and quite a few costly mistakes, I finally got my hands on what I'd been searching for. So with the charred pages by my side, I meticulously followed the ancient recipe and ground the ingredients into a fine powder. And apparently, just in time. My wife was scheduled for a 3-day work retreat with her buff young boss in Cancun the following weekend. So I boiled some water, poured it into a mug, and added a few spoonfuls of the Tupi tea powder. Well, here goes nothing. Be Mayasa Tumba Tupi. As I gulped the ancient mixture down, I have to admit, I almost gagged. Frankly, the tea was bitter, earthy, and far from delicious. But I didn't care. If the burnt taste in my mouth meant that I could feel like a man again, I'd drink it every single day. Then I waited for the formula to kick in. Hours later, when my wife finally got home, I still felt dead as a doornail below the waist. So the next day, I increased the dose and guzzled down even more of the tea. Still nothing. Dead. At this point, it began to dawn on me that I had wasted months of my life and several $1,000s on a stupid Tupi pipe dream. But on the third day, I felt something strange, something I hadn't felt in a long time. A faint tingling, or more like a buzzing sensation in my pants, like my little friend was waking up after a very long sleep. But that's not all that came back. When my wife walked in the door, for the first time since I could remember, I felt a tidal wave of desire wash over me. My eyes lingered on her still fit physique for just a moment, and suddenly I felt like an animal, a dangerous animal.